Some of them are sinister, some are murderous, some are treacherous, but all of them were feared. They created themselves empires and ruled over their subject with a ruthless iron fist. The money they made for themselves was beyond our imagination, and their lives were infamously legendary. From judges to policemen to politicians, everyone was in their pockets, and some of them were immortalized in Hollywood. In this episode, we're going to look at some of the most feared gangsters of all time. Here we go. Bugsy Siegel. Did you know that some of these feared gangsters even had a celebrity status back in the day? We thought to start off our countdown with one such a man, Bugsy Siegel. Initially having a reputation as a hitman and a mafia enforcer, Bugsy's lucky moment, well, at least from his side, came when he befriended Meyer Lansky, and eventually Lucky Luciano, another two notorious crime figures at the time. Bugsy quickly won their hearts because of his ruthless and lengthy criminal record that spanned from murder, rape, drugs, to armed robbery. During the Prohibition era in the early 1920s, he formed Murder Inc., an organized crime group that gained notoriety for its extensive bootlegging and over almost 1,000 contract killings. It was his crown jewel and regularly reserved him the front page in many local newspapers and tabloids. Bugsy loved gambling. He even funded and ran several early casinos in Las Vegas. He loved tourists who visited Las Vegas too. He loved them so much that he and his men robbed tourists until his death. Like many of his trade, Bugsy ended his life prematurely, at the age of 42, and was assassinated by a rival hitman. But his charismatic and chaotic legacy lived on, even to this day. Albert Anastasia. The next one on our list is quite special. He could be the mobster with the highest number of nicknames in American crime history. Albert Anastasia was also known as the Earthquake, the One-Man Army, Lord High Executioner, and Mad Hatter. Who would have thought that the Mad Hatter would leave Alice's Wonderland and come to the New York underworld? Unlike other crime bosses, Albert was particularly known for his ruthlessness. Whoever was in his way paid the price with their lives, and wherever he went, he left a trail of cold blood. Soon, his merciless methods earned him respect and fear among the fellow gangsters. Albert's rise to power was paved with treachery, betrayal, conspiracy, and backstabbing. In early 1930, during the Castellammarise War, an underworld war that broke out between two rival crime families, he gained an unprecedented power among the Sicilian mafia by playing one side against the other. Sounds like a script out of a movie, doesn't it? A key ally who helped Anastasia in his power play was Lucky Luciano, and we'll talk about him later in this video. At the pinnacle of his power, Albert Anastasia became the head of the Gambino crime family. But hey, even the bloodiest and the most feared gangsters have to accept that what goes around comes around. Just like he did to many others, Albert was betrayed by his closest and was shot dead on the morning of October 25th, 1957. Vito Genovese and Carlo Gambino, the heads of Genovese and Gambino crime families, had ordered his assassination. Carlo Gambino. They can be utterly ruthless and cold-hearted, but even the most feared mob bosses have one thing in common. Have you noticed it? They never truly die peacefully and always meet their end by a bullet. Carlo Gambino, however, not only did he reign long, but also managed not to end his life with a bullet. That's a tremendous achievement for a crime boss. Carlo began his criminal career early and young when he joined the Sicilian mafia as an assassin, and soon he made himself a reputation as someone not to be messed with on the streets of New York. Carlo was an associate and friend of Bugsy Siegel. The two later joined Frank Costello and Lucky Luciano, two of the most infamous crime bosses at the time, and began their ascension through the ranks of the mafia. By 1957, after he assassinated the notorious Albert Anastasia, he solidified his position as the most powerful crime boss in the USA. He became even more powerful after the Appalachian Meeting, when he took the control of the Commission, the governing body of the entire American mafia. Known as the King of the American Mafia, Carlo Gambino's reign of terror came to an abrupt end when he finally died of a heart attack in 1976. His track record of evading the law was legendary. He only spent 22 months in jail during his entire criminal career that spanned for over 50 years. By the way, haven't subscribed to our channel yet? Go ahead and hit that bell button, and we'll keep you updated. Frank Costello. Frank Costello, an iconic mobster in American crime history of the 1930s and 40s, began his criminal career early when he was a teenager, and by the time he was 25, had gone several times to jail and had a lengthy list of crimes that included racketeering, kidnapping, bootlegging, and even murder. Frank's influence and power began to skyrocket after he met Lucky Luciano, and with his newfound allies, he eventually murdered and pillaged his way to the top and became the head of the Genovese crime family. In the 1950s, however, Frank's luck was running out. The FBI and law caught up with him, and he went in and out of jail several times because of tax evasion and contempt. Although he was able to maneuver himself brilliantly out of this legal menace, his golden age finally came to an end in 1957, when an assassination attempt was made on his life. The hit was ordered by Vito Genovese, a rival New York mob boss. Although he fell from grace after that, he continued his criminal operations until he died of a heart attack in 1976, becoming one of those rare mobsters who died of natural causes. Lucky Luciano. If there was ever an undisputed criminal mastermind in the US crime history, whose brutality equally matched with his genius, it's Lucky Luciano. Known as the father of organized crime in America, he was instrumental in creating the National Crime Syndicate, a federation of criminal organizations, and the Commission, the governing body of the criminal underworld. Born as Charles Luciano in Italy, his life was full of adventures. Make that criminal adventures. After migrating to the USA in the early 1900s, Luciano started a gang of his own as a teenager. Luciano began to consolidate power in the early 1930s during the Castellamarese War between Joe Masseria and Salvatore Maranzano, and his path to power was covered in blood, conspiracies, betrayals, and switching allegiances. With his key ally, Albert Anastasia, he betrayed his then boss, Masseria, to Maranzano. But soon after Luciano became a powerful mobster, Maranzano saw him as a threat and decided to eliminate him. However, Luciano was able to uncover the plot and decided to act first and eliminate Maranzano. After that assassination, he cemented himself as the unprecedented power in the American mafia. However, Lucky Luciano's luck finally ran out in 1936 when he met his match, the brilliant and tough district attorney Thomas E. Dewey. Dewey, after years of investigations into mafia crimes, finally cornered Luciano and got him convicted for his prostitution rackets. He was given a lengthy and unforgiving 30 to 50 years in prison. However, luck came looking for Lucky in 1939, when the Second World War broke out in 1939, and he shortened his sentence by helping the US Navy in its war efforts. Afterwards, he was deported to Italy, where Luciano continued his drug business. He died from a heart attack in 1962. John Gotti. Next on our list is John Gotti, one of the most powerful mafia bosses ever to rule the American underworld, and one of the most well-dressed and elaborate gangsters of all time. Unlike many other gang bosses who prefer to stay away from the media and keep a low profile, Gotti loved to be in front of cameras and always dressed for the occasion. Like many others, Gotti and his brothers grew up in poverty and chose the path of crime at an early age. Always outspoken and flamboyant, John Gotti literally owned many judges, the jurists, and even police officers, and that allowed him to escape the most public and scandalous trials not just once, but 3 times. Because of this, he got the name the Teflon Don. At the peak of his criminal career, Gotti became the most powerful and feared mob boss in all America, earning between $5 and $20 million a year, making him one of the richest mobsters who ever lived. However, Gotti's luck ran out after he was betrayed by his second-in-command to the federal authorities. He ended up in jail in 1992 and died there of throat cancer. Amado Carrillo Fuentes. Now, we're going to see the big bosses that made big money in their criminal careers, and meet Amado Carrillo Fuentes, the legendary drug kingpin that ruled over the skies. Born and raised in Mexico, Amado's story is somewhat different than others. For him, drug trafficking was a family business, and his uncle, Ernesto Fonseca Carrillo, was the leader of the Guadalajara cartel. His uncle showed him the ropes in the drug business, and soon after, he became a specialist in drug trafficking from Latin America to the USA. He eventually assassinated his own boss, Rafael Aguilar Guajardo, and became the head of the Juarez cartel, which had a fierce reputation for torturing, decapitating, and mutilating its adversaries. At his peak, he had built himself a multi-billion-dollar drug empire that was estimated to be worth over $25 billion, making him one of the richest mobsters of all time. As the pressure mounted on him from authorities, he finally went into hiding, but even the richest of the drug lords were not lucky enough to enjoy it. Amado wanted to change his appearance to get a new life and underwent plastic surgery, but died during the procedure on July 4th, 1997. Griselda Blanco. Who said only men can become drug lords and mob bosses? Here is Griselda Blanco, one of the most ruthless and arguably the first woman billionaire in the world. Known as the Queen of Cocaine, Griselda was no ordinary woman. Born into poverty and chaos in Colombia, Griselda ran away from her mother to Medellin in her youth to escape the brutality she faced at the hands of her mother's boyfriend. Afterwards, in Medellin, she resorted to a criminal life of kidnapping, pickpocketing, looting, and drug trading. After immigrating to the USA in the mid-1970s, she established a small cocaine business in New York. However, she was identified as a drug dealer by the authorities, so she fled back to Colombia. Being a woman of persistence, she came back to the USA in the late 1970s and settled in Miami, where she founded a cocaine business that would eventually become one of the largest drug distribution networks in the USA and a multi-billion-dollar empire. After her involvement in the Miami drug wars and many brutal assassinations, the federal authorities turned their eyes on the cocaine queen and arrested her in 1985. But still, with the help of her son, she successfully ran the empire until her release and subsequent deportation back to Colombia in 2002. But her drug empire slowly collapsed during her imprisonment. Fallen far from the top, she was assassinated by 2 gunmen in 2012 in a butcher shop. The only thing the billion-dollar queen had with her was the $150 worth of meat she had just bought. Al Capone. Al Capone was one of those mobsters you can truly call legendary. The methods he used to gain and keep power sends chills down the spine even today. As a teenager, he joined the 5 Points gang and later rose to prominence in the criminal syndicate Chicago outfit, where he began to amass immense wealth and affluence through racketeering, bootlegging, pimping, drugs, and money laundering. As a mobster, his ruthlessness was legendary. He orchestrated the Valentine's Day Massacre, where he eliminated many of his rival gang members in cold blood. At the peak of his power, he was regarded as the most powerful and the richest criminal at the time, with a fortune of over $3 billion. Not only was he able to buy mansions and lavish properties, but he also bought many police officers, agents, judges, and even local politicians. However, no amount of wealth could save him from the tax authorities. Just like us, not even the mightiest of the gangsters could escape them. He was found guilty of tax evasion and got imprisoned for 11 years in 1931. His health deteriorated rapidly during that time, and he was finally released in 1939 when he suffered a severe case of syphilis. However, he didn't live much longer to rebuild his mighty empire, and the legendary Scarface died of a heart attack in 1947. Pablo Escobar. There is not another man in history who became an icon like Pablo Escobar. He was hated by many, yet many think of him as a hero. He was pursued by many, yet wherever he went, he was surrounded by cheering crowds. Even to this day, he is hailed as an inspiration by many in Colombia, while others consider him as an epitome of evil. Colombia's love-hate relationship with Escobar began with his ascent as a powerful drug lord in the 1970s. After founding the Medellin cartel, his drug cartel quickly monopolized the cocaine trade into the USA. By the early 1990s, his net worth was estimated to be $30 billion, making him one of the richest 10 people in the world at the time. He used his enormous wealth to carve himself an empire in Colombia. For some time, everyone was in his pocket. Local law enforcers, politicians, and even the lawmakers. He entered Colombian politics after winning the 1982 parliamentary election, and he carried out many community projects for the people in Medellin, which brought him immense popularity among the people. However, the US and Colombian governments eventually came after him, and the Medellin cartel, after a series of bloody conflicts and massacres throughout the late 1980s, made Colombia the murder capital of the world. Escobar was no longer able to live a normal life and went into hiding. History has proven time and time again that hiding never truly saves drug lords, and Escobar's fate was no different. He was eventually cornered and shot by the police in his own hometown, a day after his 44th birthday. And that concludes our video of the most feared gangsters of all time. Have we missed any? Or are there ones we should have put in here? Go ahead and let us know in the comments.